So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jenna Sistad, and I am with the Ocean Monmouth Health Alliance, which is our region's cancer and chronic disease prevention coalition. You'll hear a little bit more about the work that we do later on in the presentation. But today is a collaboration between our coalition and Prevention First's coalition, Prevention Coalition of Monmouth County. We're excited to have Kate McCarthy here talking to us about the adverse childhood experiences and how they impact chronic disease later on in life. This is also a collaboration with our SEED team, Cancer Education and Early Detection, and they will be talking to us about screenings that may be available in your area for the families that you serve after we hear from Kate. So thank you everybody for being with us. We're excited to hear from Kate. And so I'm gonna kick it right over to you, Kate. You're up.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you for the opportunity for a wonderful collaboration. You know how I feel about adverse childhood experiences, trauma, and the disease model. So I'm really excited to share, what I know with everybody here. So I know I have until about 12:40. So if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. You can even just kind of unmute yourself and stop me where I am. But I know we're going to save time towards the end. But I know if it's a super, I need to ask this question, feel free. But so just a little bit about myself. I graduated from Monmouth University with a master's in social work. I started working in the substance use field for a little bit, and then I transitioned into the prevention field, so kind of more of a macro lens. As the assistant director to Prevention First and the coordinator for the Prevention Coalition of Monmouth County, I'm very passionate about prevention, and I know that it goes in many different aspects than one, not just substance use and mental health, but also in disease. And so I'm really excited to talk about this with you and to share a little bit about what I know. I always like to do this presentation from a different perspective beyond just throwing facts at you and statistics at you. I always like to share about my personal experience with adverse childhood experiences. And so we're going to get into that in just a second. But before I do, I also want to let anyone know that in the past, there have been times when we talk about childhood trauma, it could potentially bring up some stuff. So please know that you can, take a break, step away. You can leave this training, even though we wouldn't want you to leave, but we totally understand that. My information is in the chat and I'll put that in there shortly, or Jenna can for me. So feel free to reach out as well. So you'll see a couple pictures on your screen and a little bit about my upbringing. I was born in a family right in Middletown, New Jersey, right in Monmouth County. And, mom, dad grew up with 3 older siblings who were kind of a lot older than me, anywhere from 12 to 9 years older. So by the time I came around, I was like, okay, we're going to force you to play baseball since it was so heavily influenced in my family. My mom ran the Babe Ruth League. She was the president for many years, and my dad coached. And I was very active. I think I was one of the last generations that, when it got dark, you had to be home by 5. Otherwise, you'd have to deal with it, So always out in the park, always very active, such a tomboy. And, I played sports. That was my thing. I played softball and I was really pretty good at it. And, did the summer camps, really enjoyed socializing and being with people. And, I'm sure a lot of people at that time in my life would say, seems like a pretty normal kid. But internally, there was a lot going on. I was a very anxious kid, especially after I had started to realize and become self-aware about the trauma and the issues that were going on in my home. At 9 years old, I had found a needle that was used for heroin. My brother, one of my brothers started, to use drugs, and it was a group of kids that were using drugs together. And so I shared this information with the school, and here comes DIFUS, here comes DCP&P, right? Enters my life. At one point in my life, I was removed from the home because of the intensity of what I was growing up in. I lived with 3 people who had a substance use disorder in my immediate family. Some of them also had, in addition to that, mental health disorders. And so it was a very toxic place. When I started to become more and more self-aware about what was happening, it affected how I felt about myself. And so when we see and we deal with kids, when we deal with teens and later on adults, we see this manifest in different ways. And with kids, it can happen with behaviors. I was riddled with anxiety. You know, we talk about the link today with trauma and disease. Well, I have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, totally linked that health, that brain to gut, right? And that's something that has always been a part of me since I was in elementary school. It has never left. You know, these are true consequences and true results to growing up with a lot of trauma and traumatic experiences. You know, growing up with three individuals who really were suffering, you start to think that this is somewhat normal and you start to respond to it. And so I wanted to be the fixer. I wanted to help everybody. I wanted to make sure that they were okay, that they were going to be all right. But I also lived in fear. I always had that fight or flight response running through me because I was afraid someone was going to die. And that scared the crap out of me. And I share this experience because when we work with children, sometimes we don't know everything that's going on inside, but we see different behaviors. And sometimes there's reluctance when I work with teens, or there's, you know, just a hyperness, or, you know, not a focus, you know, with some of the kids that we work with. And, you know, I share these stories because today I really want the one major thing to come out of this is what happened to you, not what's wrong with you. When we see patients and we deal with our clients, it can be very challenging at times because it can be really hard to work with individuals who are reluctant, but there's always a reason. And so here is a picture of my best friend and I. We have been best friends since we were 5 years old, and we are still best friends. You know, I share this picture because she is the sunshine to my life, and her family are one of the main reasons why I am who I am today and where I am today. Because as you'll learn, and as many of you probably already know, we can endure trauma and traumatic experiences, and we're going to talk about that in childhood and early adolescence today. But there's also something amazing that can really combat the trajectory of trauma on the body. And that is love. And that is sense of belonging. And my best friend and her family really showed me that. They showed me the other side to things. And so I'm forever grateful for that. When I was in middle school, my mom's addiction really had spiraled. There would be weeks and days where she would just stay in her room. So, you know, we talk about later about neglect and things to that nature. And yes, I did experience that as a child and an adolescent. And at 14 years old, my mom had died of a massive heart attack. Heart disease runs in my family. Addiction runs in my family. You know, I remember talking with her about the Irish side of my family who came from Sligo, Ireland, and, you know, moved to the Bronx. I believe there were 9 siblings that all died in relation to addiction, whether it was alcohol, heroin, you name it. So again, just pinpointing the trauma, things going on to the disease concept. And so when my mom passed away, my life changed yet again. At this time, I was living with my father and my oldest brother, Scott, who I'm going to share a little bit about in just a second. My brother, Scott, had bipolar disorder. So as I was growing up in high school, it was very, you could say interesting, sometimes chaotic, because sometimes, you know, with bipolar disorder, he didn't want to be on medicine. And that would be really tough to navigate as somebody who cares about that person. And so, you know, growing up with this family, and there were 6 of us in the home to now 3, it was a huge change in my life. And moving through to my time in college, you know, there was a couple of days where that had went by. I think it was like 2 days that went by. And we were saying how at this point, my brother Scott had moved out of the house. He had his own apartment. And, you know, my sister and I were on the phone. I was about 22 at the time. And, you know, she said, I haven't heard from him. And I said, well, I haven't either since Tuesday. And so it was pouring rain. We took a ride to his apartment with my father, and we saw the mail piled up for the week. And we saw this bird that was just right there in the rain. I'll never forget it. And we had to call the police, and we had to call the maintenance man for the apartments. And sure enough, it had to be treated as a crime scene immediately. I was not able to say goodbye to my brother. He had overdosed. He was found with 6 fentanyl patches on his body, alcohol in his system, as well as Xanax. And so I share this experience too, because I know when we talk about the original ACE study, it was conducted looking at the life from 0 to 17 when it came to trauma. And I do want to share about being a young adult too, and being an adult and going through traumatic experiences, because that hits too. And, you know, with this particular situation with the loss of my brother, it really changed my trajectory once again. This was a very dark and hard time to go through because it was complicated grief. You know, not being able to see them to say goodbye. So even when we work with families who have loved ones that have substance use disorder, or who have lost a loved one to a substance use disorder or passing of overdose, you know, it's very complicated. It is very tough and challenging. And for those of you on the call who may have experienced this as well, please know that, you know, my heart is with you, because it's a very tough experience. But as my life moved on in my 20s, I started to really shift what I wanted to do for a living. And, you know, I went from being that kid that, you know, when trauma really hit me and my self-esteem plummeted and my academics plummeted in elementary school because I was a nervous wreck, I was able to have people in my life that changed my trajectory, that helped me believe in myself. I went to therapy. I had families that showed me what the day-to-day should look like. And I was able to be a part of the dean's list when I graduated Monmouth. I was able to get married and find the love of my life and be able to have family that is my family by blood, but also family other than that. And I share this with everyone because as we move through this, I always like to show the realness of it. So there is the rainbow at the end, but it is our job when we work with people to help them see that there is a potential rainbow and that there is help out here. So I'm going to share this clip of Oprah, and it's a nice introduction of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences and trauma during childhood, and the benefit of love. I'm actually going to share my screen by sharing my sound. Okay, you should be able to hear it now.
With Oprah Winfrey.
Oprah, your story for 60 Minutes this week is about childhood trauma. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of new science here about trauma-informed care. For anyone who's dealing with a traumatized child, what can they learn from your story?
Well, I think that this story is it is my hope that our story on trauma-informed care will not just be impactful, but will also be revolutionary. It certainly has caused a revolution in my own life. And I was struck by the story because it reminded me of my own childhood growing up in Milwaukee. It's not lost on me, the irony of being back in the same city, Milwaukee, where I grew up on welfare, poor, a lot of negative experiences, sexual abuse and all of that. What's the difference between a really bad childhood and being able to overcome that, and a traumatic childhood and someone not being able to overcome that?
Really, it boils down to something pretty simple.
And the answer that Dr. Bruce Perry gives you is relationships.
if you also have opportunities to be connected to people in positive ways, that can buffer some of those effects. And as you get older,
I'd like to know more about that.
What he really means is love. He's a scientist. He's not going to use the word love, but it really is about how you are responded to, valued, trusted, and loved by those around you. So I didn't get it from the people who I felt I should have gotten it from. It can be anybody who cares enough about you to ask the question, what happened to you?
Could you trace back in your mind, it was that person who made the
I know
difference?
exactly who did it. I know exactly the moment I started to feel valued. And for me, it was school.
I wanted to be a fourth grade teacher because of Mrs. Duncan. And I haven't seen Mrs. Duncan since then, and Mrs. Duncan is here today. Mrs. Duncan!
The moment I felt the most value was in my fourth grade class when Mrs. Duncan said to me, I was the one who was chosen to lead the class and whatever it was.
So what was that like? I don't really remember. I do remember you.
I remember you were such a fluent reader.
Well,
if I had a class full of students like Oprah, I would have been floating on air.
Mrs. Duncan instilled in me this sense of believing that I mattered. And that is what every human being is looking for.
When you first heard that I had done something in life, did you know that it was me?
Yes, I kept up with you without your being aware of it.
And it was Mrs. Duncan who helped heal you?
For me, yes. It was Mrs. Duncan, and then it was my sixth grade teacher, Mr. Graham. It was school that made me feel a sense of value and connection.
You learned a lot on this story.
Oh, I learned a lot on this story. This story was life-changing for me.
Life-changing, really?
Life-changing. And people use that word rhetorically. Life-changing. It's changed the way I operate in my business, with my people, with my school. 1, 2, 3. You say that the most important question to ask of people who have gone through trauma is not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Yeah.
So when you see, a church being shot up, or you see, all of the headline making stories of people seemingly gone mad, your first thought is, what happened to that person? Right. What has been life changing for me is the question, what happened to you? Not what is wrong with you, but what happened to you? Which is an important question, not just for people who have been so-called traumatized, but it's the most important question you can ask of anyone. I can say that of all the stories I've ever done in my life and all of the experiences I've ever had and people I've interviewed, this story has had more impact on me than practically anything I've ever done.
It's changed the way you see everyone?
It's changed the way I see everyone. So when I have an employee who is acting out of line or who is just being a jerk, I don't think, what's wrong with that guy? What's wrong with that girl? What's wrong with that? I think, I wonder what happened to them. I wonder what happened to them. I wonder what happened that caused them to behave that way. That's what this story did for me.
And so we have here love and connection is some of the best medicine for prevention. And I love sharing Oprah's special on that as a little clip, because I think it gives a really good rounded understanding of ACEs in whole and what we can do and play our part in making a change. And so adverse childhood experiences is categorized in 3 different types, right? So we have, you'll see here on the left of your screen, abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, and it breaks it down into the categories. So we see, sexual abuse, emotional, physical. The same thing with neglect. There's the physical neglect as well as emotional. And then the household dysfunction. We have divorce, abuse toward a parent, substance use, incarcerated relative, and mental illness. So this study originated in the 1990s, and There have been other studies that have been produced ever since, and the statistics have changed since then. You'll see here on your screen that based off of the 1990s ACES study that was conducted, that we have here 1 in 8 had experienced 4 or more ACEs. Just recently that has changed to 1 in 6, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. So I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen the ACES questionnaire, and I know this is a little hard to see if you're like me and wear bifocals. It's a tough one. But there's a couple of questions, very simple, but it essentially talks about chronic humiliation, right? Physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, that physical neglect, did you lose a parent? That would be considered a traumatic experience from 0 to 17. Watching your mother be abused, parent with addiction in the home, parent with mental illness, and the incarcerated family member. When we do this presentation in person, we do pass out the questionnaire. In the past, some of our audience members have taken the questionnaire to determine their ACE score. And in essence, what is the response? So we understand what the questionnaire is about, what it's asking. It's asking about these traumatic experiences from our childhood and early adolescence. But what is the correlation from trauma at that period of time and to the future? Well, it's broken down into different categories here. You're going to see health. So that's a lot of that disease piece here, the obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, STDs, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, broken bones. And then we see the behaviors. So a lot of the times we might see this with the adults we work with our adolescents that we work with, and also life potential. This can impact, and there's a correlation statistically with graduation rates, academic achievement, and lost time from work. So broken down, I just give another visual of some of the other types of, disease that can come from, trauma in our childhood and the links there. So you'll see that over at the health risk behaviors, there is physical inactivity listed there, in addition to what we just talked about. Social outcomes as well. You'll see the lack of health insurance, that there is a correlation there with ACEs, unemployment. And here we just have a couple more statistics. So in 2019, the CDC scientists analyzed data from more than 144,000 adults in 25 states and found that 61% of them experienced at least one ACE. And you'll see here to the left that there it is. 1 in 6 adults experience 4 or more types of ACEs. And this was conducted in 2019. 5 of 10 there was a link. At least 5 of the top 10 leading causes of death are associated with ACEs. And here we break down a little bit more. We break it down, the health conditions associated with ACEs. So autoimmune diseases, what is the correlation there? Well, among patients with lupus, 63% reported having 1 or more ACE, and nearly 20% had 4 or more ACEs. COPD. In a study on ACEs among individuals with COPD, after controlling for smoking and other risk contributors, the risk for COPD increased as the number of ACEs increased, suggesting that ACEs were an independent risk factor for COPD. Diabetes, cancer, depression. Having at least one ACE is associated with almost 3 times the odds of depressive symptoms among individuals reporting poor perceived social support. Again, I'm not going to go through them all, and I can share these slides. I can give them to Jenna to share with everybody here. Just again, showing that correlation and influence. So here we have 3 different pictures of the brain on the left side, emphasizing the nucleus accumbens, the prefrontal cortex, and the amygdala. And so there is research supporting that ACEs does impact these particular areas of the brain. So we asked the question, how does trauma in childhood link to disease in adulthood? Okay, we understand what we're defining as trauma. We understand what diseases it's linked to, but how does this happen? So the scientific reason why individuals with ACEs are at higher risk for these issues can in part be attributed to the way early experiences of adversity affect brain and body development. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive functioning, a critical area for also learning. So again, if we do work with young children, adolescents, or even adults, you might see some of these things as well. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. Let me go to the next one. So here we also talk about chronic stress. And this is a big one. You'll see on the left, and I'm sure many of you have seen this time and time again, but how does stress affect your body physically? How does it affect your nerves, your skin, your muscles, your joints, your heart, your organs, your immune system? We know that this influences it. So one example is the toxic stress that comes with experiences of childhood trauma that in turn produce poor health outcomes. The constant presence of chemicals such as adrenaline and cortisol heightens blood pressure, weakening the heart and circulatory system. These hormones also raise glucose levels, which can lead to type 2 diabetes and increased cholesterol. Constant stress can cause the adrenal glands to give out, eventually producing immune system issues. As a result, individuals with ACEs are more likely to experience a host of chronic illnesses in adulthood. And so I love this slide. If any of you have ever seen Donna Nakazawa present, I've seen her several times, and she's one of my favorite authors. She wrote a book called Childhood Disrupted. It's a great book. I highly recommend it if you're interested in learning more about ACEs and how it affects the body. It's wonderful. But I saw her present, and she had a slide very similar to this. And so on the left, you'll see a grizzly bear. So I asked the question to you, what would you do if you were in the presence of a grizzly bear? Some of you might freeze, right? Some of you might think, oh my gosh, and run away. Well, according to my husband, who's a mountain man connoisseur, the answer would be to play dead, right? Because there is no running from a grizzly bear. You know, sometimes with the black bears, they say to make noise and stand really tall. No, a grizzly bear, you play dead. Because, you know, you freeze, right? So that fight or flight response, you're in fear. Your body is now saying, what do I do? There's potential for death and harm, right? And so now I ask you to bring your attention to the right picture. You'll see a person who has created a fist, and you'll see a small child who looks terrified, right? Looks terrified. These two situations your body responds very similarly, right? It responds very similarly. Now, when you have a small child, as to the right, who's experiencing this overwhelming stress, now at that age, there's a limited capacity to manage that stress. This type of abuse starts to manifest. And like we talked about earlier, it can impact when you have chronic abuse and chronic stress like this in your body, right? Your body keeps the score. I don't know if anyone has ever read that book as well, but it's an excellent book. Your body keeps the score. That's what happens here. And so you see that, and what we can see here is that this can affect that child's developing brain, their ability to learn, their ability to handle their emotions, and their ability to think things through. It's releasing all those hormones that we talked about earlier. And, you know, I show this slide because I think it's really gives a visual as to this, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mary. It gives the visual, and, you know, you see something as a grizzly bear and our response is, oh my gosh, like we can die here. But the same thing when we're in a situation like that, the same response in our body. And it doesn't just disappear. So we also talked about earlier, kind of mentioned that life potential. I always love to show Maslow's hierarchy of needs here on the left, because a lot of the people we work with may be missing some of these tiers in the pyramid, or they have at one point in their life. And so starting from the foundation up, those physiological needs like water and food and air and shelter, right? I mean, that's so important. If we don't have that, how does that affect you day to day? Safety needs. Do you feel secure? Do you have employment? Okay, if we don't have, you know, a substantial amount of food and shelter, and then we don't have employment, well, how are you feeling? How's your foundation with some of the clients and patients and the people that we work with? The love and belonging. Let's talk about, you know, a child or an adolescent. If that's missing, how do we expect that individual to now walk around with great self-esteem? How do we expect them to reach their highest potential? And so there is a correlation with low life potential, meaning they have lower high school graduation rates and academic achievement and experience more lost time from work as adults. So again, just showing another thing that this could be impacting is some of the individuals who have not graduated high school, who may, you know, not have been able to reach their highest self-actualization, the peak of the pyramid, and why. A 2008 study examined prevalence of ACEs in adults across multiple backgrounds. Researchers found that certain minority groups were more likely to be exposed to certain ACE categories: Black, Hispanic, and multiracial individuals who were more likely to experience parental separation or divorce and the incarceration of a family member more than white individuals. Multiracial populations and those with a yearly household income of less than $15,000 had more exposure to all ACE categories than other groups across the board. So when we work with these populations and we see some of the outcomes that could potentially be happening because of the lack of resources and support, going back to the Maslow hierarchy of needs, doesn't it make sense? Isn't it unfortunate? Yes. So one of the books, I'm in the chat, and the book is called Childhood Disrupted by Donna Nakazawa. And there's also Body Keeps the Score. Both really good books. So I know we talked about the disease correlation, and I also want to acknowledge that there are other household dysfunctions that are not listed on the original ACE questionnaire. That has expanded in the last, decade or so. Which is a good thing, because there are other things that could contribute to the outcome linking trauma to disease, whether that's disease of mental illness, disease of substance use, disease of chronic disease as diabetes and things that we've been talking about today. But I also just want to emphasize on some of the things we may be seeing when we work with people, like social and emotional skills. A lot of the people we've been working with since COVID has happened, they're seeing an impact on children and social and emotional skills, that there's a need for training and programs to work with children and adolescents on social and emotional skills. There's a need to train staff to help support these children that are coming back into the school system to be able to do this. Well, yes, there's a correlation here. There's a reason why. Knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary for youth to recognize and control their emotions and behaviors, establish and maintain positive relationships. This is all so important. And, it helps them make responsible decisions eventually and solve challenging situations and set and achieve positive goals. So these social and emotional skills that could potentially be impacted due to trauma is really important for us to address, not just individually, but as a society. Exposure to violence in childhood. Now, we talked about this a little bit on the ACES questionnaire, but sometimes, there's a lot of stigma that comes around when we talk about mental health, when we talk about substance use, when we talk about treatment and getting help, when we talk about violence, when we also talk about sex trafficking. There is a correlation linked with trauma in childhood and a person's involvement in future sex trafficking, whether they're an adolescent or an adult. There's risk of injury for that person. There could be future violence, victimization, and perpetration. So sometimes we do see this in the system. If somebody has been violated and has endured physical violence, we can see them to become a person who demonstrates violence. Also, here comes that lower educational attainment and limited employment opportunities thing again, right? So if we're being physically abused, there's a correlation to your self-esteem, how you feel, how you process things, and then also your ability to reach your highest peak in life. And again, this makes sense, but sometimes also, breaking it down from, wow, these experiences from then, oh, okay, wow, this is how come certain people might be experiencing these outcomes. So one of the things that I wanted to jump into, and I know I'm cutting it close, is now transitioning into more of a system piece of trauma. So here on your screen, you're going to see different levels. In the middle is the adverse childhood experiences in which we've been talking about today. Down at the bottom, the roots of the tree, the foundation of the tree, are the adverse societal conditions. And I know we deal with a lot of this, right? We see it a lot in some of the communities that we work with. Ineffective schools, don't always love the term, but I think we get the concept. Income inequality, crime, poverty, social exclusion. Now you can see how these different tiers can manifest to the top, where the leaves would be. So if our root system is deeply rooted in poor soil and the foundation of our trunk is now experiencing additional traumatic experiences, we can see where the leaves would potentially blossom and grow, where if there is no intervention, there is no level of prevention, where we see things as disease, obesity, substance use disorders, unwanted pregnancy, suicide, HIV, depression, dementia, PTSD, car crashes. You start to see these things. And I always love showing this slide because I know we deal with a lot of individuals who could probably relate to some of these things on the screen. And so in preventing ACEs and reducing health conditions, taking a look, we could, if we started to be a part of the change, right? And we started to implement, the conversation of supporting our clients and patients, which I know we already do, but if this was done on a very large scale, being able to help and support people in the way that they need to combat some of the things we've talked about. We could see up to 21 million cases of depression, 1.9 million cases of heart disease, up to 2.5 million cases of overweight obesity. It's already high. And so we can start to see a difference. Now we talk about the economic toll, right? The lifetime cost of non-fatal child maltreatment, which covers 5 of 10 ACEs incurred annually in the United States, is $401 billion. Now, I know this slide is a little blurry, but I wanted to make it large so you can see the concept that we're talking here. The amount of money that we're spending in the correlation to some of the things that could be linked to trauma. This I'm going to fast forward, but again, I can share the slides because I know we're on a time crunch here. But communities and organizations can be a source of trauma, or they can buffer us against the negative effects of adversity. Together as a community, we can set goals, we can implement policy and practice change that builds community resilience. So healthcare providers can anticipate and recognize current risks for ACEs in children and history of ACEs in adults, and refer patients to effective services and support. You know, we do this already. You're doing a great job. Link adults to family-centered treatment approaches that include substance abuse treatment and parenting interventions. Do we even know what they are? Are they available? Is there a wait list? You know? And also, one of the things I like to share is that Preferred Behavioral Health Group, our nonprofit that we work for, is a trauma-informed agency. And what does that mean is that from the very top all the way to the very bottom, we are trained in our core to be trauma-informed, whether how we respond to our coworkers, how we respond to our staff, our superiors, our clients, and how we work together to make sure that we are constantly keeping innovative on all the new research and data that comes out about this. So that is also something that is a possibility. And again, I will share these slides, but you know, I just want to go to the last two pieces here where it says secondary prevention is the stage where teaching resilience and addressing potential risks can help adults who have not yet developed serious health conditions. The report on the health effects of ACEs in the Journal for Nurse Practitioners recommends practicing mindfulness through activities such as meditation and yoga, as well as therapy when needed. Tertiary prevention is the stage where a health condition has emerged and treatment is needed. In addition to medical interventions, individuals with chronic diseases can improve their outcomes through participating in support groups. Again, things that I am sure we're already doing, but just know that this is important in trying to provide them with that wraparound approach as we see other things manifesting, as we see other things they could potentially be struggling with, you know, giving them the option of resources that could really assist them in that process of healing. This is also you can order this for free. If you go to the CDC website, it's Preventing Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's a great book. It talks about it talks about ACEs. It talks about how we can prevent them and also breaks down what that looks like. And you'll see here down at the bottom, I highlighted it, intervene to lessen immediate and long-term harms. You see right here, enhanced primary care, victim-centered services, treatment to lessen the harms of ACEs, treatment to prevent problem behavior and future involvement in violence, and family-centered treatment for substance use disorders. And again, last but not least, you know, there is such a stigma surrounding all of this. I've had conversation with people that I know personally who are nurses in hospital systems who have even said, you know, for example, when we have somebody that comes in that, you know, overdosed and now we're treating them and then they're getting ready to leave, but then they come back, you know, they don't feel as if they're trained to really handle that, to really be able to support that person in the best way they should. You know, there's a lot of different things that I think I'm sure many of us could agree on that could be enhanced or could be more helpful to people in healthcare who work for healthcare and also for the people we serve. But knowing that, having the conversation, starting to understand what ACEs is, being able to understand what we can do about it, and being able to support them with the resources, and also maybe even having a trauma-informed VNA or agency is also a great way to really start shifting the focus from an individual issue to a community response. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. That is the end of the presentation. I did try to fast forward as much as I could for time's sake, but thank you, everybody. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you so much, Kate. I've heard a version of this several times from Kate, and every time, you know, she amazes me with her transparency and her personal stories that really coincide with the message here. And the overall message is, you know, through social connectedness and, you know, really our prevention efforts as a team and as a community, we can do more to change the future outcomes, behaviorally, socially, mentally, and physically. For the communities that we serve. So thank you so much. And as people are starting to write their questions into the chat box, I would just like to say that Ocean Monmouth Health Alliance is here as a resource. We do a lot of navigation to different community resources, a lot of the things that Kate was going through as far as the chronic diseases and cancers that are outcomes of some of these high ACE scores, we can help navigate to. We have a network of providers that are within our coalition, so we do not do this work alone. And one of the partners that you'll hear from today is our SEED team, Cancer Education and Early Detection. And I'm going to hand it over to Angelica Stokes to talk to us a little bit about SEED.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Awesome.
I'm going to share my screen for you.
Thank you. So again, my name is Angelica Stokes. I am here representing the NJ SEED program for short. That is New Jersey Cancer Education and Early Detection Program. I am representing Raven Gates, who is our marketing and outreach manager. She has handed over the baton to me, so I am here in her stead. I'm going to go to the next slide. Again, we are NJC, we are a cancer screening program. We are state and federally funded. What we do is we offer free to low cost cancer screenings for uninsured and underinsured adults who are the ages 21 to 64 within the Monmouth and Ocean County areas of New Jersey. We can also connect individuals with primary care or to primary care providers for all medical needs. The cancers we cover are breast cancer, cervical, colorectal, and prostate cancer. Again, the eligibility requirements are you must be an NJ or a New Jersey resident over the age of 21. There is a income requirement that you must meet, and then you want to be uninsured or underinsured. When we say underinsured, we have some patients who have insurance, however, their insurance provider does not cover some of the services that they need, usually diagnostic. Everyone is welcome here. We welcome all those who, no matter what your pronouns are, no matter what you identify as, whether you are a she, her, hers, he, him, his, they, them, or theirs, you are welcome here. And we definitely want to assist you if you need the resource. Some of the services that we provide are education, kind of like what I'm doing now, but we'll go in and we'll actually give you an in-depth explanation of what we do and the cancers that we provide. We also provide outreach, screenings, case management, tracking, follow-up, and facilitation to treatment. Some of the screenings that we cover for women are clinical breast examinations, mammograms from the age of 40 to 64. The American Cancer Society guidelines are age 45. However, depending on the recommendation of the provider, it can be provided. We also do Pap tests starting at age 21. Pelvic examinations, the HPV test, a human papillomavirus test, which is pretty much correlated to the Pap test. We also provide diagnostic testing if results are abnormal, FIT kits, FOBT tests, which is for colorectal cancer screening, and then we also provide referrals to treatment. Screening services for men are the prostate cancer tests. So the PSA, which is the prostate specific antigen, it is a blood test. It's used to find the levels of PSA in your blood. These tests are provided for men ages 55 and older. If you are African American male or considered to be high risk, we do start the test at 45. Diagnostic testing is also provided if results are abnormal. And then from there, we also provide the FIT test and the FOBT test. All can receive cancer screenings regardless of your citizenship status. We, the NJC program, is a non-reporting program. So when you come over and receive our services, you do not have to worry about your information being handed off to anyone else or any other programs, because it stays in-house. If you are diagnosed through SEED, we can connect you with our clinical case manager. We have what you call presumptive eligibility, or PE Medicaid. It's an insurance that is provided to eligible patients if they receive a breast and or cervical cancer diagnosis. This will lessen the financial burden during treatment for the individual. So a lot of our patients, although they don't have insurance, they may also have charity care, but charity care doesn't always cover everything. So get insurance if you can, which will also help you out with other things that you may need medically. A cool new initiative we have is the transportation services that we provide via Uber Health. We can assist individuals with an Uber ride to and from their scheduled medical appointments. These rides are free, so it will not cost you anything. Or your clients. We may have professionals on here, so I just want to make sure that I'm addressing everybody. My apologies. But your clients, your patients, the funding is received this year for our patients, SEED patients, but they must be in the Monmouth and Ocean County area. If you need bilingual support, my friend Diana, she's on here. And her information is here on the screen. Definitely feel free to reach out to her, and she'll be able to give you more information regarding transportation services. Follow us on social media. We are social. You can find us on Instagram as well as Facebook. Instagram at Ocean Monmouth SEED, very simple, very short. However, sometimes on Facebook, we have to be a little bit more descriptive in our names. So definitely follow us. The names are here for you. But like us, even if you want to just scroll and look, stop by, say hi. Here you will find our information. Next, I'm sorry, our contact information. I'm not sure if Natasha is here, but she is our program director. Myself, patient service coordinator for the programs, our case managers, Kathleen and Edna. Hi, Tasha. And then Raven, in her absence, she is, again, our marketing and outreach manager. If you ever need any assistance or you need help with anything, definitely feel free to either email us or call us. If you have clients or patients who are interested in our services, they could also use the numbers that are listed here pretty much to inquire about the service and see if they qualify. Jen, if I took up too much time, I'm sorry, but that's all I have today.
No, you didn't at all. Thank you so much, Angelica. And thanks for stepping in for Raven last minute. It's always good to know about the screening services that we can offer to the families that we serve. Lots of times people don't know that these things are available. So it's crucial to get the education out there about it. I'm going to stop sharing, but Angelica can certainly put her contact information into the chat. If anybody has questions for her, feel free to unmute yourself now or write it into the chat, and we can do a couple minutes worth of question and answer for Angelica or for Kate.
So I would like to share something if I can.
Hi, Mary, go ahead.
So I packed my ACE score for 50 years. And from 28 to 48, I battled obesity, irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, digestive issues, tumors, aneurysms, and really not until I did a deep dive in functional nutrition and a deep dive through the Human Service Addictions Program did I come to grips with my very high ACE score. Being at Brookdale, I saw my life splattered on the blackboard. And, you know, of course, in the medical industry, we just put a Band-Aid on it. And I feel with all the work that I have done, looking for root cause of my health issues, I feel in this mental health arena, we're doing a huge disservice to ourselves and to those we serve when we're not doing a very deep dive on nutrition. And I know that can be challenging if we are dealing with marginalized, you know, communities who don't have access to healthy fruits and vegetables and protein. But, you know, even in Donna Jackson's book, I mean, it's all, we do not realize that food heals. The proper foods heal. And this whole gut-brain axis, including with the ACE score, you know, the ACE study was triggered by observation in the mid 80s, right? It was triggered by an obesity program where they were seeing women drop out. But I just wanted to share that. I think this nutritional piece and the gut-brain axis is also a missing link into helping people heal. And I'll speak for myself included. So I just wanted to share that. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Mary, for sharing your personal experience. And you're right. Kate talked about it a little bit earlier about, you know, the security of having housing and the right food. It's all so important. And so I want to just draw attention to Marlene Alvarado and Diana Rios, who are part of the Ocean Monmouth Health Alliance team. They are here to assist and navigate both bilingual. So if families are facing food insecurity or do need a resource such as, you know, a chronic disease screening, a smoking cessation program, a COVID test, these ladies are here to help. So please take advantage of them if you have families who need. Any other questions for the ladies that presented today? Okay. All right. Well, we can end here. Thank you again to Kate McCarthy and to Angelica Stokes. We appreciate both of your time today, and feel free to follow up with me afterwards if you have more specific questions for these ladies and would like to be connected. Have a blessed day, everybody, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.